One of Donald Trump's selling points as a presidential candidate was his business experience, especially his skill at making deals. He had written a 1987 bestseller called The Art of the Deal. How has Trump's business savvy translated into the political arena? Our next guest discussed that topic recently with the John Locke Foundation. Andrew Taylor is a political scientist at North Carolina State University, also a columnist for Carolina Journal. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me, Mitch.
So I just mentioned Art of the Deal was, before he became president, one of the things that Donald Trump was best known for. You were interested in looking at how the ideas presented in that book translate into Donald Trump as president.
Yeah, and political scientists don't read it. I think that they look down their noses at obviously a lot of them look down their noses at anything Trump, but particularly this because they presumably don't think it's relevant to understanding what he would be like as president. But the book, it was a very important book in American business literature. It was a bestseller for a year in the 1980s. It transformed Trump from into an national and international personality and business icon. And it contains in it a lot of stuff that's not really relevant to the idea of presidential leadership, but there are a few strategies in there in how to make a deal that I thought, wow, this is really interesting and could be applied to him being president and thinking about presidential leadership as a deal that you have to make with a variety of different kinds of people. Some people who are kind of like you and want to be partners, like, for example, the congressional Republican leadership. Other people who may be adversaries, like congressional Democrats or like certain foreign leaders. So I really thought this would be an interesting exercise to look at those strategies and try to see how they've played out while Trump has been president.
What are some of the things that you saw in The Art of the Deal as you were reading it and said, oh, yes, this really does have a definite way to apply it to the presidential style?
Well, there's in chapter 2, there's 11 winning strategies, Trump calls them. And some of them, as I said in answer to the last question, aren't particularly relevant to presidential leadership, but I picked out, and possibly arbitrarily, but they seem to present themselves to me as relevant to presidential leadership. So things such as being able to use leverage to pressure the person that you're dealing with, to use a wide variety of different strategies, to be unpredictable, to try to put your opponent off because you've done something that wasn't expected, to be to think big, to moonshot or hit a home run rather than play small ball, to use a sporting metaphor. There were 5 of these strategies that I was able to glean from those 11 that I wanted to use and apply to Trump as president.
We're chatting with Andrew Taylor, political scientist at North Carolina State University. One of the things that you also did after looking at the book was say, okay, well, how does this play out in the types of things that President Trump has actually had to do? And you looked at the normal lawmaking process, also the budget process, and his dealings with foreign leaders, and found some very different things.
Yeah, so there are, I thought, 3 different types of deal-making scenarios that presidents are put into. One's making laws, regular legislative process in which you deal with Congress. And there, the interesting thing is if there's no deal, nothing really happens. The status quo continues. The second process was the budget, which is very interesting because the budget isn't a regular piece of legislation because, as we all know, and we've lived through one of these very recently, if budget bills aren't passed, if spending bills aren't passed, the government shuts down, which is a way in which that you can place additional pressure on the participants in the deal. And I thought, well, on budgets, that should help Trump. The way he likes to make deals, according to The Art of the Deal, the way he likes the negotiating strategies he uses, the budget-making process should be more amenable to his strategies than the regular lawmaking process. And then, as you said, Mitch, there's the third one, which is dealing with foreign leaders, and I argue that should be most likely to be Trump to be successful, most consistent with his winning strategies as explained in Art of the Deal, because he can really sort of be unpredictable. What is the outcome of no deal? We don't know. The president can pull things out of his back pocket. He can make threats. He can make feints. He can be unpredictable in a way that you cannot be if you're president in the domestic arena in dealing with the Congress. And so I sort of hypothesized that scenario number 3 would be much better, much more suited to Trump's winning strategies.
Looking at those strategies and what we have seen for presidents in the recent past, are these very different ways than we are accustomed to seeing our president operate?
Yeah, I think so. And I think this has to do, obviously, with Trump's background. He is unique, really, amongst our modern presidents. The only president with a background that is remotely like his, completely outside of politics, in the post-war period is Eisenhower. And of course, Eisenhower and Trump are very different people and have had very different kinds of experiences. So coming out of the business world, he's obviously going to approach the presidency and presidential leadership in a very different way than anybody that we can think of. He hasn't been trained in the way that George W. Bush and George H.W. Bush have been trained, or even a Barack Obama, who didn't have a particularly lengthy political resume, but was much more of a conventional politician than Donald Trump was.
Do we have a sense of how people are responding to this style? Do we know yet whether people say, I kind of like having a president who acts this way, or are people saying, let's go back to what we had before?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people's views of Trump, of course, are colored not by that. They don't sort of sit down and assess Trump and say, you know what, I don't really like him, but that was a pretty smart move he pulled. Or I do like him, but he really kind of messed up strategically there. Their views of Trump are so polarized, the vast majority of the public, that they don't even visit this issue intellectually. They don't even contemplate it. We might be helped in the future when we can look back sort of more objectively and analyze Trump and be able to pull back some of the layers and be able to evaluate him that way. But no, people just don't do that. This is such a heavily polarized environment that people don't seem to be in a position to be able to evaluate President Trump that way.
In the brief time that we have left, for those who have to negotiate with Donald Trump, would they be well served reading Art of the Deal and trying to glean some of what they might get from the other side of that negotiation?
Possibly. I mean, I think the art of Trump's presidential deal is very similar to the art of the deal and his 11 winning strategies that he talked about in the book. So you can see we've got 2 years of Trump presidency now. I think that tells you as much as the book did, and to that extent, I feel pleased with the project, because that's the whole goal, isn't it? And reason why I think Art of the Deal is important, because it does instruct a lot of what this presidency has been like. So they don't have to read the book, but they certainly have to study Donald Trump.